Tonight, breaking news, the House voting yes on a deal to avoid a debt disaster. The bill now headed to the Senate. The government running out of time before it reaches the debt ceiling, triggering economic chaos. Just 5 days left until America won't be able to pay its bills. But is there enough support to push the bill through the upper chamber? The new battles that could hold up the deal will have full coverage from the Hill. Another breaking political headline, Mike Pence is set to enter the 2024 race, taking on his former boss, President Trump. Another one-time ally, Chris Christie, set to launch his campaign next week. What all of this could mean for Trump as the war of words escalates with his most formidable challenger, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Lawmaker murder arrest, police tracking down a suspect months after that shocking shooting in New Jersey. A councilwoman killed outside of her home, how the two may have been connected. Outrage in South Carolina tonight after a 14-year-old boy was shot and killed by the owner of a convenience store who wrongly believed he was shoplifting. The charges that man is now facing. Plus, a jaw-dropping crash on a Georgia highway. A car going airborne after driving up the back of a tow truck. How that driver, who miraculously survived, is doing. A new FDA warning about the popular weight loss drug Ozempic, why the agency is urging patients not to get the drug from certain pharmacies. And signs of hope in the Amazon. 4 young children missing for months after a plane they were in crashed. The new clues on the jungle floor suggesting they could still be alive. Top Story starts right now. Good evening. I'm Ellison Barber in for Tom Llamas. We begin Top Story tonight with that breaking news. Late tonight, the House passing a bipartisan bill to avoid a catastrophic debt default after weeks of negotiation between both parties. The next hurdle, a divided Senate. The 99-page bill negotiated at the highest level by President Joe Biden and Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy would suspend the debt ceiling for the next 2 years, ensuring the government won't run out of money to pay its bills. After the House, the bill must pass the Senate, just by a simple majority. But early indications suggest there's resistance from both conservative Republicans and progressive Democrats. Any one senator could hold up that vote, and time is of the essence. June 5th, that's this Monday, it's the day the government would begin to run out of money without a deal. And here's what even a short-term default would cost. 2 million jobs, America's perfect credit rating, and $750 billion over the next 10 years. The stakes could not be higher. Here's Ryan Nobles with the very latest on that significant progress made tonight.
The deal to avoid a catastrophic default passing its first major test.
The bill is passed.
Surviving a House vote despite opposition to the bill worked out by President Biden and House Speaker McCarthy. Earlier, the president sounding optimistic.
Now, we're going to deal with the debt ceiling. I think things are going as planned, God willing.
Republicans had demanded spending cuts in order to raise America's borrowing limit for 2 years. The package would cut deficits by $1.5 trillion over a decade, including limiting spending increases to just 1% for 2 years and clawing back unspent COVID aid money. Speaker McCarthy trying to wrangle votes with a growing number of Republican defections.
You're not spending more money. There's no new government programs. There's no tax increases. There's nothing in the bill that you really should be negative about.
Conservative Republicans arguing the cost savings are not enough, and progressive Democrats unhappy with the cuts and impact on social programs. Is this an example where everybody had to give a little bit in order to get something done?
Well, the fact that the very left of my party and the very right of the Republican Party seem to be aligned on this bill tells me it's probably a pretty good piece of legislation.
But new indications tonight about a possible battle in the Senate, where 60 votes are needed for passage and with bipartisan criticism growing. Tonight, Senator Bernie Sanders, who caucuses with the Democrats, saying he cannot, in good conscience, support the bill. And some Republicans concerned about the military budget.
On the defense side is terrible. We've adopted the Biden defense number after a year of saying it was inadequate.
Ryan Nobles joins us now. Ryan, you mentioned some opposition in the Senate. Does it seem like this bill can make it through by that June 5th deadline?
Allison, it does seem as though leaders are optimistic that the votes are there for passage. The issue may be the timing. Any one senator can delay this process, potentially pass that June 5th deadline. But Senate leaders told us today they are negotiating to speed things up to make sure that this bill is passed in time so that America does not default on its loans.
Ryan Nobles on Capitol Hill, thank you so much. Now to Davenport, Iowa. In the race against time, authorities still searching for survivors of that partially collapsed apartment building. Crews returning to the scene today, combing the wreckage with high-tech drones as families who've been pleading for help turn their anger, their frustrations at the city, who called off the search earlier this week before deciding to change course. Here's Maggie Vespa.
Tonight, amid the destruction in Davenport, drones in the air and renewed urgency on the ground. Crews today scanning this crumbling 6-story apartment building after the city admitted 2 people may still be in the rubble, trapped for close to 72 hours.
How confident are you that this is going to make a difference?
I'm confident. I just need them to find my dad.
The two, Ryan Hitchcock and Brandon Colvin. Colvin lived in this apartment.
I just want someone to come in from out of state that has more knowledge on this here type of situation.
You don't trust authorities here to handle this?
Yes, no, we need someone out of state.
Engineers say they're using a laser scanning drone to build a 3D model of the site, warning the building could collapse at any moment.
Find our people!
Meanwhile, anger mounts. Many furious that early on, crews searched less than 24 hours before the city said there were no survivors and demolition would begin soon. The turning point, Lisa Brooks, rescued Monday, just hours after the search was called off. The 52-year-old now out of the hospital.
As the ladder come up to me to get me out the window, I was scared. I was real scared.
And yesterday, fire crews went back in and saved 9 pets. Now nearly a dozen rescued and being reunited with their owners. But for the families of those still missing, anger and frustration as they wait for answers, clinging to hope.
If anybody can survive, he can.
Maggie Vespa, who has been reporting on the ground all week, joins us now from Davenport, Iowa. Maggie, a lot has been said about how we got here. This building had a history of complaints, and the owner had reportedly begun some repairs. Has he spoken publicly?
So, Ellison, as of today, he has. Andrew Wold, that owner, saying in a statement, we're basically first, I should note, not acknowledging that history of complaints, but then saying that he's keeping families and tenants in his prayers and also thanking first responders. At the same time, new tonight, the city of Davenport now taking him to court, citing him for failing to maintain this building in a safe condition in violation with city code. That comes with a potential fine of $300. Ellison?
Maggie Vespa, thank you. Now to the 2024 race for the White House. Tonight, it's heating up with NBC News learning 2 big names, Mike Pence and Chris Christie, are ready to announce. This as Florida Governor Ron DeSantis campaigns in Iowa today, sharpening his attacks against former President Donald Trump. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez has all of that for us.
Tonight, the race to take on the Republican frontrunner, former President Trump, is getting more crowded, with 2 former Trump allies turned critics about to jump in. A source familiar with the planning tells NBC News former Vice President Mike Pence is set to formally announce next Wednesday in Iowa. Pence, who often touts Trump administration achievements, has recently blasted Trump's actions on January 6th, saying his reckless words endangered my family and everyone at the Capitol that day. And I know history will hold Donald Trump accountable.
I think the times call for different leadership, and I'm confident we'll have better choices.
And now former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie is planning to announce he's running, 2 sources tell NBC News. Christie slammed other Republicans for not hitting the former president hard enough.
You can't beat Donald Trump by playing bumper pool and hitting it off 3 cushions and hope that it goes in the hole. That's not the way it works.
Trump's big lead in the polls not scaring away the competition. Tonight, the man seen as his toughest opponent, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, on his first official campaign swing through Iowa, stepping up his attacks on the former president.
We chose freedom over Fauciism, and we are better off for having done that.
And responding to new criticism from Trump.
Even Cuomo did better.
Who suggested New York's former Democratic Governor Andrew Cuomo handled COVID better than DeSantis did in Florida.
6 months ago, he would have never said that, right? He used to say how great Florida was. Hell, his whole family moved to Florida under my governorship. Are you kidding me?
Some voters, though, skeptical he can take on Trump. Do you think the governor should be running this time around or not?
I kind of think he should have waited until 28.
Now, DeSantis' critics say with this more crowded GOP field, it will be harder for the candidate to clear a path. Essentially, the anti-Trump vote will be split up. But DeSantis' team sees an opening here, that these more moderate candidates will essentially cancel each other out, and that DeSantis will appeal to more conservative voters looking for something new. Elson?
Gutierrez, thank you for that. And with the anticipated launch of 2 more Republican presidential campaigns, the 2024 race is heating up. So let's bring in our political panel, Kevin Madden, a communications specialist who served as senior advisor and spokesman for the Romney 2012 presidential campaign, and Amisha Cross, Democratic strategist and former advisor to the Obama campaign. Kevin, let's start with you. So former Vice President Mike Pence is planning to announce his run for the presidency next week. He's been polling in the single digits. We can show viewers some of it. In the most recent polls, he hasn't polled higher than 6% compared to the 2 frontrunners. Realistically, does Pence have a chance here? And what does his campaign mean for the rest of the Republican primary?
Well, it has to be considered a long shot. I mean, I think if you look at Mike Pence, his whole entire national political profile is sort of owed to Donald Trump making him vice president. He raised his name ID, and it got him the sort of national stature that he's even needed to be in the conversation. You know, one of the challenges that he's going to continue to have is the same challenge that I think Chris Christie might have is while he's known now as a critic of Donald Trump, he built a profile as somebody who had sworn their allegiance to Donald Trump during the Trump administration. So he has a very, very difficult path ahead if he's going to win the nomination. Where I say he has one strength is that as an evangelical, as somebody who has had strong appeal to the evangelical base inside the Republican Party, if you look at the early contests of the Republican nomination where they're waged, places like Iowa, where evangelicals figure very prominently in the race, as well as South Carolina, where they figure very prominently, that could be a place where he could stake some ground and actually overperform some of the expectations. And then, if he starts to get momentum there, begin to build out his campaign and possibly raise some more money. But other than that, he still does face some enormous challenges.
Amisha, Kevin said it. Pence built his profile as someone who swore his allegiance to Donald Trump. We have seen him try and walk this fine line of criticizing and then also praising his former boss. What do you make of that? How will his relationship with Trump impact his run for office from a Democrat's perspective?
Pence probably has one of the toughest ropes to walk, particularly because we remember the hang Mike Pence chants that were outside on January 6th. We remember that former President Trump did not call down the dogs, so to speak, when they were threatening a sitting vice president, his sitting vice president. But Donald Trump, let's make no mistake, would not have won in 2016 without also adding Mike Pence to that ticket. He was able to ease over a lot of the evangelicals that were just spoken of. But I think that Mike Pence is going to have a hard time trying to separate himself because on the one hand, you can't tout the achievements of the Trump administration. Meanwhile, throw shade, so to speak, at that same administration that you happen to be part of. And we saw the debacle specifically walking into the pandemic that the Trump administration had, in addition to his very racist, very anti-immigrant, and strategically anti-civil rights policies and practices. So I think he's going to have a very interesting rope to walk. But also, I'm not exactly sure what the path is for Mike Pence.
Kevin, we have another high-profile Republican ready to announce, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. He is set to join the race Tuesday. Christie, of course, dropped out of the presidential race back in 2016. That was right after the New Hampshire primary. How are his chances this time around?
They're not much better. Look, I mean, 2016 race, one of the interesting things about Chris Christie was he went and staked his claim in New Hampshire. He went up to New Hampshire, camped out there, spent a bunch of money on ads. And he actually ended up finishing 6th. And so that's a state that actually, if you look at the more moderate profile of the state and the fact that it's a northeastern state, he hails from New Jersey, that would have been his best chance, and he still finished 6th. So it's really hard to see who the Chris Christie constituency is inside the Republican Party landscape right now. And the other thing, again, this is not a national primary. These contests are going to have to go state by state. Where does Chris Christie make the case that he can win in any of these early contests? Iowa, I don't think he's registering there and doesn't really have the profile for that state. New Hampshire, he finished 6th last time. South Carolina, a southern primary, again, very difficult. And then he would have to go to a place like Florida where maybe you have some New Jersey snowbirds that could help him there. But that's Ron DeSantis' stronghold. That's Donald Trump's stronghold. So where he wins, it's really hard to see. So I sort of rate his prospects again as a long shot.
Okay. Amisha, so we have quite a few Republicans at this point in this race, some that have officially declared and at least 2 more. We know who will announce next week. Obviously, we've been talking about that. It's a really big field, right? So when you're looking at this, declared and potential candidates, who do you think is the opponent Democrats would want to go up against President Biden?
Democrats are ready to go up against any of these individuals against President Biden. But I think one of the top contender, as judging by the polls and judging by the fervor out in the streets and amongst Republican voters, is still former President Donald Trump. Unless we see one of the many cases that he has against him actually land him in some legal trouble or have legal ramifications that include prison time, Donald Trump seems to be the front runner, and that has not changed. Even though the landscape for Republicans seems to continue to widen, it's hearkening itself back to 2016. At this point, I think that everyone is primed and prepped on the Democratic side for a Trump rematch, but also looking at the potential of there being a sleeper who kind of pops up in the middle of this. But the thing that matters to Democrats the most is being able to sell our message, being able to talk about the seismic achievements of President Biden, being able to tout the Infrastructure Act, being able to talk about what he's done with the CHIPS Act, being able to talk about bringing back American manufacturing, being able to talk about lowering the costs of prescription drugs like insulin. This president has a record of achievement, and that's what matters the most.
They might be ready for a Biden-Trump match-off, Amisha, but do you think that that really is who Democrats, if they could have their pick, is that who they would like to have Biden go up against, or do they think there would be an easier candidate to take out in a general election?
Well, he's already beat Donald Trump once before. Other than that, DeSantis is a mini Trump. So having DeSantis run, I don't see DeSantis having any level of national wings. He's still very much playing in a small pool when it comes to his culture war arguments. I think personally that Tim Scott may be a sleeper here, and that his approval ratings, his ratings as we go into this polling-wise, may increase over the next few months.
Okay, and Kevin, quickly before I let y'all go, I have to ask you the same question, sort of, but from the Republican perspective. What candidate do you think the GOP wants to be the nominee? Who do you think would be best positioned to beat President Biden?
Well, look, I mean, first of all, to the earlier point, the one thing nobody wants here is a rematch, and I think that we're trending towards the one thing nobody wants is a rematch between Trump and Biden. But look, if you have to think about the contrast. Who would be the candidate that would offer a youth argument, an optimism argument, and could win the suburbs in a way that Donald Trump's, toxic in the suburbs? Who could do that? Tim Scott is the candidate that you would build to do that. I feel like I think we also agree that he'd be the candidate that would sort of best represent a new Republican Party in a way that could drive a contrast against Biden that maybe Donald Trump can't drive.
All right, Kevin Madden and Amisha Cross, we appreciate your time and insight tonight. Thank you. Breaking news, former star of That 70s Show, Danny Masterson, found guilty of 2 counts of rape. The conviction coming at a retrial after a jury deadlocked last year, unable to reach a verdict. These charges, these convictions stemming from rapes that happened between 2001 and 2003. NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett joins us now with more on this. Laura, walk us through what we know about this verdict. How did this jury get to their decision, especially after we saw that other jury deadlocked?
Yeah, it's interesting. It all comes down to the evidence and how prosecutors were actually able to get in evidence about the drugging that these women say they went through. Last time around, they testified that they felt woozy, sort of weird. It was all by implication. This time, prosecutors were very clear, much more direct in alleging that, in fact, he had drugged these women. Now, they did deadlock on at least one of these stories, but they did convict him on the 2 counts as it relates to 2 of the women.
What stood out to you in this trial in terms of just the other items that prosecutors had here? Danny Masterson did not take the stand this time, and he didn't last time either, right?
Yeah, but the linchpin here, Allison, is it's all about the Scientology. It's all about the fact that he was a leader in the church, and at least according to these women's testimony, it was that they had really been sort of in fear of coming forward because officials had made it so that they couldn't go to law enforcement. Now, of course, the church denies this. He's denied that any of this has happened, but their story was that church officials really discouraged them from coming forward.
Sentencing, do we know when that will happen and how much prison time he will likely face, given that he's convicted on 2, not all 3 of these?
Yeah, the sentencing is still a few weeks off, but he is facing up to 30 years here now. Of course, he could still appeal, but very, very serious convictions here.
All right, Jarrett, thank you. Now to a major update in the murder of a New Jersey councilwoman. Authorities arresting the man they say shot and killed the rising political star outside of her home in February. Investigators saying the two may have known each other through church. Ron Allen has the details.
Tonight, a suspect formally charged with first-degree murder in the shocking killing of a New Jersey councilwoman shot right outside her home back in February.
The murder has shaken the community, and no arrest will bring back the late councilwoman.
After an almost 4-month manhunt, police arresting 28-year-old Rashid Ali Bynum for the murder of Eunice Dwumfor, some 300 miles away in Chesapeake City, Virginia. Investigators say Dwumfor and Bynum knew each other, apparently connected through her church, his number in her phone's contacts, and that a trail of evidence led to Bynum, including cell phone and highway toll records showing he traveled from Virginia to New Jersey and back the day of the murder.
911, where's your emergency?
Yeah, well, it was definitely gunshots right outside.
Authorities say Dwumfor was ambushed in her car and pronounced dead at the scene in Sayreville, New Jersey.
I saw a man shooting into the driver's side of a white vehicle.
Surveillance video obtained by NBC New York shows a man running after the shooting. May have been critical evidence in Bynum's arrest.
Surveillance video was recovered, capturing the suspect fleeing from the scene.
At the time of the murder, we talked to neighbors terrified by the shooting.
What did you hear last night?
I heard of this volley of gunshots about 7:30 last night, and I immediately got away from my windows. I knew right away that was abnormal.
Dwumfor was a rising Republican star in New Jersey, winning her seat in 2021. Democratic Governor Phil Murphy paying his respects after the tragedy.
It's just a shocking, shocking development. So please keep her memory and her family and the community in Sayreville in your prayers.
She was just 30 years old and a mother to an 11-year-old daughter.
Eunice struck me as a person who loved to challenge and loved to serve.
The city's mayor saying she is not running for another term out of concern for her family's safety after receiving racially charged messages about her colleague's murder.
None of us sitting up here, none of us should have to worry about the cars that drive past their house. None of us up here should have to worry about whether or not their family, their children or grandchildren are safe to take a ride to the park.
Now, the Dwumfor family attorney says they don't recognize the suspect and are waiting on more details from prosecutors.
Who is this person? Why would he target their daughter as alleged by the prosecutor's office? And what was the motivation? That's certainly not clear.
Ron Allen joins us now here in studio. Ron, this is a shocking, disturbing case. What is next for it? And is there any indication tonight as to why this happened?
That's the question everybody has. And prosecutors aren't really talking about motive. Back when this happened in February, they did say that it does not appear to be a politically motivated crime. We know that the suspect and the councilwoman knew each other. We don't know a lot about their relationship, but that seems to be at the center of the case. We know he made his first court appearance today. He has public defenders who are not commenting on the case. We expect him to be extradited and heading to New Jersey in the coming weeks to face murder and weapons charges.
I'm sure we'll learn more then. Ron Allen, thank you so much. Still ahead tonight, teen shooting outrage. A 14-year-old killed by a store owner who claimed he saw the teen stealing water bottles. What police are saying about that claim and the charges the shooter is now facing. Plus, break in the case. A woman whose body was found more than 50 years ago identified by investigator, the real name of the woman known for decades as Trunk Lady. And a wild crash in Georgia, a car speeding over a tow truck, then flying through the air. How that driver miraculously made it out alive. Stay with us. Back now to a South Carolina community outraged after the fatal shooting of a 14-year-old boy. Police say the teen was killed by a convenience store owner who thought the child was shoplifting, but authorities say he wasn't. Nothing was stolen. NBC's Valerie Castro has the latest.
Tonight, a South Carolina convenience store left vandalized by angry protesters. The outrage over the death of a 14-year-old boy shot in the back and killed by the store's owner. Law enforcement officials say 58-year-old Rick Chow wrongly believed Cyrus Carmack Belton was shoplifting 4 bottles of water.
He did not shoplift anything. We have no evidence that he stole anything whatsoever. There was a verbal confrontation inside the convenience store. The victim went outside. He took off running.
Chow was arrested and charged with murdering the 8th grader after investigators say Chow chased him for several blocks before shooting him. One woman who didn't want to be identified telling our NBC affiliate she saw the deadly shooting firsthand.
That young man didn't have to die like that, but for me to witness that yesterday, like, I'm in fear for my own brother. And for any of the kids that's in my neighborhood, because these kids, they come outside all the time. They come to the store all the time.
Another witness describing the aftermath.
It's just sad. It's sad. If y'all would have seen that baby laying right there, that's all I can see.
Chow, who appeared in court for a bond hearing Tuesday, initially telling investigators he believed the teen was also armed. The sheriff confirming a gun was recovered near Carmack Belton's body.
He just said, we chased him. My son said he had a gun. I took aim and I shot him. I mean, it was pretty simple by him explanation, but he never said the gun was pointed at him or his son. He never said that he was in danger. Never felt like his son's life was in danger. And that's the standards you have to have in order to use deadly force.
Community reaction leading to officers now standing guard outside the store's property.
Regardless of what happens in the community, you cannot take the law into your own hand. You don't have the right as a citizen to violate another citizen's property.
While others reflect on the young life lost.
It could have been your child. It could have been your loved one who walked in and didn't come home. It makes me emotional. It makes me angry. It makes me upset.
Valerie Castro joins us now in studio. Valerie, what else can you tell us about this convenience store owner?
So, Allison, the Sheriff's Department says over the last 5 years, there have been hundreds of calls of service to this location for things like shoplifting, assault, and robbery. Records show that in 2018, Robert Chow was accused of shooting a shoplifter who assaulted him. That person survived. And in 2015, the department says Chow confronted another shoplifter who then threatened to shoot Chow. Chow was accused of shooting at that person's vehicle 6 times. No one was hurt in that incident, and Chow was not charged in either case. We should note we reached out to Chow's family for any statement on his behalf, but have not heard back.
Valerie Castro, thank you. Now to an astonishing caught-on-camera crash in South Georgia. A car going airborne after driving onto the back of a tow truck. It is hard to believe how it happened. A little harder to believe that somehow the driver survived. Blaine Alexander with the video and the story behind it.
Officials say they don't know how the driver could have missed the flashing lights and emergency vehicles, that she approached this accident scene and the wrecker at full speed. This body camera video shows what happened next. The car rams into the back of the wrecker, then goes airborne, slamming into another car as officers run to help.
1050 rollover. 1,000 EMS immediate roll.
Terrifying thing to watch because you didn't know who was in that car, how many people were in the car.
Lowndes County Sheriff Ashley Polk was right there.
I've been doing this 31 years. I've never seen anything like it on up. It was a miracle she was alive because one more roll she'd probably been ejected.
It all happened on a busy South Georgia highway. According to the incident report, the driver of that car was rushed to the hospital. The sheriff says there was an empty car seat in the back, and they spent several minutes searching for a baby, scared that a child could have been ejected, later learning that the driver was alone in the car. A nearby deputy was hit by flying debris. Miraculously, everyone survived.
It's dangerous out there. Cars moving at high speed, and we're out there trying to get people out of cars. Give us all the room you can.
An important reminder after a terrifyingly close call. Blaine Alexander, NBC News.
When we come back, a new warning about Ozempic. The FDA sounding the alarm about versions of the weight loss drug that are being sold at specialty pharmacies. How to make sure you're getting an approved version of the medication. That's next. Back now with Top Stories news feed, and we begin with a break in an infamous cold case from more than 50 years ago. Authorities saying they've identified the remains of a woman known for years as the Trunk Lady. She was found strangled to death in a trunk in St. Petersburg, Florida, back in 1969. Police used new DNA evidence to identify the woman as a mother of 5 from Arizona. Authorities now trying to find her daughters and the killer. A U.S. Navy pilot rescued after ejecting from a plane off the coast of Key West. Aerial footage showing the Navy chopper that airlifted the pilot to a hospital in Miami. Authorities say the pilot was doing routine training in a fighter jet when they ejected and went into the water. No word yet on what caused the incident. That pilot is expected to be okay. And members of the billionaire Sackler family will be protected from lawsuits linked to their company's role in the opioid crisis. A New York appeals court ruling that in exchange for immunity from civil suits, the owners of Purdue Pharma will pay $6 billion to help fight opioid addiction. The money will fund rehabilitation programs and treatments. A portion will also be distributed to victims of the opioid epidemic. We turn now to a first-of-its-kind hearing today on UFOs. NASA and Pentagon officials presenting images of unexplained objects and announcing plans to step up efforts to track them. Miguel Almaguer has the details.
The aerial images were presented today. UFOs spotted and now documented around the world. Holding their first ever public meeting, top scientists at NASA, joined by a team from the Department of Defense, revealed pictures and video like this one that captured a metallic spherical orb in the Middle East last year.
This is a typical example of the thing that we see most of.
Saying the origin of the orbs is unclear, officials at the DoD plan to soon deploy dedicated sensors to better track UFOs, technically known as UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena.
The current existing data and eyewitness reports alone are insufficient to provide conclusive evidence about the nature and origin of every UAP event.
Confirming 50 to 100 new reports a month, NASA officials say most sightings can be explained, but 2 to 5% remain a mystery.
Today's preliminary findings, which only include unclassified data, come ahead of a full report expected in July.
There's a real stigma among people reporting events. And despite NASA's extensive efforts to reduce this stigma, the origin of the UAPs remain unclear.
After decades of debunking and discrediting UFO sightings, tonight government officials are shedding light on images that will lead many to ask, are we alone?
NASA and the DoD's next hearing will be at the end of July, but whether we'll have answers to more questions is unclear. Ellison.
Miguel Almaguer, thank you. Now to an alarming new health alert concerning a popular weight loss drug. The FDA warning patients shortages of semaglutide, commonly sold as Wegovy and Ozempic, has led to pharmacies making unauthorized compounded versions of the drugs. The agency warning it's now received adverse event reports after patients used those compounded drugs. To break down this warning and what it means for patients, NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel joins me now. Dr. Patel, thank you for joining us tonight. Let's just start with kind of the obvious question here for people who don't know. What is compounding drugs? When a pharmacy compounds drugs, what exactly do they do, and why might that be necessary?
Yeah, Ellison, it's more common than you think. About 7,500 of the nation's 56,000 community pharmacies are compounding pharmacies. They play an important role not only during drug shortages, like with Ozempic, but also when you need tailored or special medications. So they can create and put together medications almost from scratch, using some of the compounds and tailor them to an individual's need. With a drug like Ozempic, this is becoming an issue because it is a hot drug and it's literally hard to find in any retail pharmacy. That's where a compound pharmacy comes in. But the FDA has a warning because of some of the compounded elements, the drugs, the chemicals that put the drug together, that they can lead to adverse events, and they are not FDA approved.
So how can patients ensure they are receiving the right authorized versions of medication?
Yeah, the most common thing that I tell patients, number one, look for a pharmacy, whether it's online or a box retail pharmacy that's licensed by your state's pharmacy board. And you can even ask, Ellison, at the point of sale, even online, to look for certification of the analysis of these ingredients. If you're not necessarily that savvy, always be prepared to be able to ask to talk to a pharmacist. That is something that any legitimate and safe pharmacy should have access to. And then also, Ellison, common sense. I've seen already online pharmacies that advertise these drugs. They have misspellings in their name. They're not using the proper names. That should be a red flag as well, that this is not a safe pharmacy to trust.
All right, common sense and questions. Good advice, Dr. Kavita Patel. We appreciate it. Now to top stories, global watch, and the terrifying moment for drivers in Kyiv as Russia steps up attacks on Ukraine's capital. New dashcam video shows the moment part of a missile fell out of the sky. You see it there, just barely missing a car. Fire and debris scattering on the roadway. No one was seriously hurt in this incident, but it appears to be part of nearly a dozen missiles Ukrainian forces say they shot down in a single day. In Nepal, a Sherpa pulling off a rare high-altitude rescue on Mount Everest. The guide carrying the climber 1,900 feet down before they were able to reach a helicopter. Officials say the Malaysian man was found at Everest's death zone. That's the section of the mountain near the 29,000-foot summit where temperatures can drop to about 90 degrees below zero. At least 12 people have died climbing Mount Everest this year alone. And a priceless piece of Italian art stolen by the Nazis has been returned home to Poland. Officials say the painting, called Madonna with Child, was sent back at no cost after it was discovered in Japan. The painting was listed by the Nazis as one of the 500 most valuable pieces they stole during World War II. More than 66,000 stolen works are still unaccounted for. Staying overseas now to the ongoing protests in India that led to multiple arrests over the weekend. A group of Olympic wrestlers were arrested after protesting for more than a month, demanding justice and calling out the Wrestling Federation president, accusing him of sexually harassing female athletes, including a minor. Here's more on that investigation. Kicking and screaming, a group of Olympic athletes wrestled to the ground and arrested. The latest flashpoint in India after a month of protests. Demanding the resignation and arrest of the Wrestling Federation of India president, Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh, for allegedly sexually harassing 7 female athletes, including a minor, according to the Associated Press. Two-time world medalist Vinesh Phogat, just one of several top Indian wrestlers to be detained while attempting to march towards India's new parliament building as a part of their protest. 2016 Rio Olympic bronze medalist Sakshi Malik getting dragged away by security forces and forced onto a bus. Bajrang Punia, another Olympic bronze medalist from the 2020 Tokyo Games, also speaking out before being detained. Both Olympic medalists threatening to go on a hunger strike and throw their hard-won medals into the country's sacred Ganges River if no charges are brought against the WWII president. Singh, who is also a lawmaker representing the ruling Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party, has denied all of the accusations and calls the protest, quote, politically motivated.
आरोप मेरे ऊपर स्थापित हो जाएगा तो ब्रिजभूषण सिंह स्वयं फांसी पर लटक जाएंगे, किसी को कहना नहीं।
The arrest over the weekend garnering international condemnation. The United World Wrestling Organization releasing a statement condemning the treatment of the wrestlers, saying in part they are disappointed over the lack of results of the investigation so far, adding UWW urges the relevant authorities to conduct a thorough and impartial investigation into the allegations. Indian police are investigating the allegations of sexual harassment against Singh and say he has been questioned in the case. For more on these protests and the impact they could have, I want to bring in Kavitha Davidson. She's a correspondent for Real Sports with Bryant Gumbel. First of all, we're so glad to have you here. Thank you for being here to explain a little more of what's going on over here. So give us the kind of broad context of this. One, how important is Olympic wrestling in India? And two, the individual sort of at the center of this case, this politician, chief of the Wrestling Federation they're seeing, how influential is he?
Yeah, so Olympic wrestling in India is huge. India is not really known as a sports powerhouse outside of cricket, but on the Olympic stage, of the 21 total medals that India has won, 6 of them have come in wrestling. So this is a very big deal in a sport that's a very big deal. The chief in question is also a very big deal. He's not only the head of the Wrestling Federation, he is a 6-term sitting member of parliament in the RJP, which is the majority party. It's Prime Minister Modi's party. So he wields a lot of political power and influence, and it's one of the reasons that it's so remarkable that these women and these wrestlers are coming forward against him.
So Singh has been stripped of his administrative authority here in terms of the wrestling side of what he does, but he still holds the position of chief. We have heard from a number of different international federations, be it the United World Wrestling. They have spoken out against this. They have talked about this, as well as the International Olympic Committee issuing a statement condemning this. Is there room for them to do more than just condemn this?
There absolutely is. And frankly, just from what we've seen in the past, we're probably going to see this more from the UWW than the IOC, than from the top down. But the UWW has already postponed a major tournament. There was the Asian Wrestling Championships that were set to be held in India back in March, and they postponed them, or they moved them, I'm sorry, because of these protests. And they have also extended a 45-day deadline to the Indian Wrestling Federation to appoint new leadership. And they basically said if they don't, they risk a ban from international competition, which means that India's athletes would be competing under a neutral flag.
How significant is it that these women are speaking out about this right now in their home country? They're doing it with some very symbolic moves around it. I mean, talking about throwing your medal into the holiest river in India, even if they postponed that, that's a very big deal. It seemed to be something that locally a lot of people were talking about. On top of it, the potential here still that they might fast. I mean, how much of India will be paying attention to these women, and how significant is it that they've chosen to speak out?
It's extremely significant, and as we mentioned before, they do so facing great danger and great political suppression, frankly, that India has been known for, both from the media, from police, obviously, and they're also doing it at a time when India is really coming to a reckoning with its problem with gendered violence. I believe gendered violence has risen 26% since 2016, which is wild. And, you know, honestly, India is a country where these kinds of attacks and this kind of harassment is not talked about. So the fact that they're starting this conversation is extremely important.
Where do you think things go from here?
I think it's remarkable that Singh still has not, I believe he's been questioned by authorities, but he's not actually been charged or arrested. There are still 4 pending unrelated cases and investigations against him, including, by the way, a murder charge. So I think we'll wait to see what happens there. But this is really a leadership thing. And reporting, one of the major things that needs to be put in place is reporting mechanisms for women and for athletes. And that currently does not exist.
Do you think there's the potential for that structural change? Because as I understand it, typically if there is an allegation involving a minor in India, which is the case here, normally that person would be detained under the laws, but he has not been.
Yes, and I think that, you know, to speculate, that's probably a function of how powerful and important this person is, or that he's being given, quote unquote, the benefit of the doubt. I do think that there's potential here. I think if there is an overhaul in leadership, which has been mandated by the UWW, and frankly, you know, Singh wasn't even investigated until this was brought all the way up to the Indian Supreme Court. So you see how many barriers of how many obstacles there are there. But I do think that there is potential for this to actually enact some change.
Great, Kavitha Davidson, thank you so much. Coming up next, signs of hope. 4 young children missing for months in the Amazon after their plane crashed. The clues just discovered that might mean they're still alive. Stay with us. We're back now with the Americas and the search for 4 children in Colombia's Amazon jungle. The children appearing to survive a plane crash, but they have not been seen for weeks. Now a new clue is leading rescuers to believe that the kids are still alive. Stephen Romo has this story.
Tonight, renewed hope in the search for 4 young children who went missing inside the Amazon after a plane they were in crashed nearly a month ago. Officials believe one of these human footprints found Monday belongs to one of the missing little girls. The commander of the search operations saying the tracks are fresh and hint that the children are still alive. According to authorities, the indigenous children ages 13, 9, 4, and 11 months were inside a plane that issued a Mayday alert due to engine failure in the early hours of May 1st. The wreckage, along with the bodies of 3 adults, including their mother, found more than 2 weeks later, thick in the Colombian jungle. Hundreds of soldiers and locals, with the help of search dogs, have been looking for these children for weeks now, calling out for them day and night, and finding a trail of possible clues that they are surviving, including a baby bottle, a diaper, and fruit that appears to be half-eaten, along with these footprints. The father of one of the missing children saying the search has been difficult, but that he has hope that his family will be reunited. Indigenous members of the community have also joined in this search operation, some holding prayers and ceremonies as rescuers count the hours, knowing that with each passing day, the chance of finding the kids alive dwindles.
Stephen Romo joins us now in studio. Such a compelling, remarkable story. What do we know about where these children were headed in that plane to begin with?
Yeah, it's something I didn't realize until doing this story. There are these very small, isolated communities, and traveling by plane, these small chartered flights, really the best way to travel. Otherwise, they're trying to go through the jungles, which these children are doing right now. There are some indigenous groups that are calling on the government, calling them out, saying these planes have not been properly inspected, safety protocols are not being followed, but so many people there right now are just focused on the hope of finding these kids.
Yeah, all right, Stephen Romo, thank you so much. When we come back, a send-off for a hero, a World War II veteran heading back to the beaches of Normandy at 102 years old. That emotional return next. And finally tonight, a hero's send-off. One 102-year-old World War II veteran from Ohio heading back to the beaches of Normandy for the first time in nearly 8 decades. He says it's a trip he never thought he would make. World War II vet Richard Stewart is flying to France.
Soon landing on the other side in Normandy.
At 102 years old, it's been almost 8 decades since he first landed on Omaha Beach.
I'm so thankful that the Lord took me over and brought me back all in one piece and one mind.
Richard is one of only about 2,000 African-American soldiers deployed to Normandy following D-Day. He served in a segregated army unit, a witness to the destruction.
They did not let us see anything, any equipment, anything had been destroyed. All we saw, they left for us to see was the dead.
Richard's role, helping maintain critical telephone communication for Allied troops.
We were out in the field inspecting the line, and bomb hit close by, and where we were, the ground shook as if the earthquake had hit.
Now, Richard is one of 43 veterans heading back to Normandy for the 79th anniversary of D-Day.
Yeah, it's my first time being back since I left her in 45.
With him, his son, Samuel.
If it wasn't for family and friends, I wouldn't be able to do it. But I think the most honor for me is the fact that he is 102 and he's lived a great life.
This trip, an unexpected blessing.
I'm feeling good, thank the Lord. We gotta get on this plane, get out. Get it around there.
For him to be blessed enough to go back to the battleground where he served. And maybe I'll be able to document a little bit of that on my phone. And I'm proud of that.
Thanks so much for watching Top Story. For Tom Llamas, I'm Ellison Barber in New York. Stay right there. More News Now is on the way.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.